Hello again, my name's Diane and I design and make patchwork quilts. And today I'd like to talk to you about what to do with your quilts when you've made too many. Something that we do, if you're as passionate as I am, they do tend to build up. So really there are three options. You either keep them for yourself, you give them away to a deserving cause, or you sell them. And I do all three of those. And today I'd like to talk to you about the way I sell and the way I gift. And if that's something that you might be interested in, please continue watching. So I have a Etsy shop, that's where I sell from. And I created that shop in April of 2017. And originally I never sold any quilts whatsoever. I used to sell paintings. Painting used to be my obsession before quilting. And that too is an expensive hobby. The cost of nice quality paper and the paints and the brushes all mount up. But there comes a point when your walls get full and you've gifted everybody that you want to gift, just the same as with quilts. And so I started to sell. I did manage to recoup the cost of the materials to keep me going. So in January 2021, I started selling quilts and quilt related items along with my paintings, and my customers didn't like that. The people that bought my paintings stopped buying my paintings. I don't think they liked the idea that I wasn't a committed artist, perhaps should be committed generally. So I continued anyway, selling both. Slowly, it took a downward turn, but I thought perhaps new products, give it a chance. But then in January 2022, so I kept going for a year, I decided that I would remove all of the paintings from my shop and just sell the quilts and the quilt related items. And at this time I used to take advice from Kim Bliss, who lives in Wales, and she talks about Etsy and the pros and cons in the UK market. And I also looked at Cara Bunting about her take on Etsy and trends. And they both mentioned having confused shops. So if someone is coming for a quilt, they don't want to find a painting, and vice versa. And so that's why I went into just selling the quilts. And just selling the quilted items made a massive difference. So my sales increased and I had some really lovely reviews, 5-star reviews, lots of people leaving me really nice comments. And there was one in particular, it really made my day. It said, "Diane's craftsmanship and customer service is at the top of the Etsy's pyramid." And it just made me feel great to receive a comment like that someone would take the time to write that. And so I thought, right, I'm doing something right here. And I had steady sales. And I think part of that positivity from my customers is the way that I sell and package and my customer service. And I'll show you how I do package my quilts. That might be of interest to you. At this point, some kind soul has gone to the not insignificant trouble of finding me on Etsy and has decided to part with very good money and to buy one of my quilts. Then I want to make the packaging a special event for the customer too. And I'll show you how I wrap. I fold it so that the top side is on the inside. So I think that in itself is a nice experience to open it, and then the last thing they see, the final reveal, will be the completed quilt. So I fold it neatly and then I wrap it in acid-free white tissue paper, and then I wrap it up in a nice little ribbon and bow, and I add a lavender bag because in storage that helps to protect it from moths and other insects, and it makes it smell nice too. Sometimes if I'm not using ribbon, I tend to use a ribbon on a child's quilt, but definitely on one of my eco-friendly quilts or upcycle quilts I'll use a selvaged tie or the jute. So this is all natural. And then I handwrite a small note telling the customer about the history of the quilt, the creation, what inspired me to make it. And I also put in there a couple of colour catchers for the customer to add in the first wash, just to make sure, tell them to wash it on a cool wash. So it looks like that. And then depending on the size of the quilt, I pop it into one of these bags. So the smaller quilts are in this, or the larger ones, the heavier ones, I use the bag which is made from 100% recycled material. So that's the packaging. In April of 2022, I had to close my shop for 6 weeks, and that's something that everyone advises you not to do, because all of your customer base that you've built up, you just have to start again. So I expected when I reopened my shop 6 weeks later that there would be a downturn, and there was. But then sales and visitors started to pick up again. So in September 2022, I decided to run my first ever sale. Now, I hadn't run a sale before because I always try to keep my costs as low as possible. So it's a good price quilt anyway, and I didn't want to put inflated prices on my quilt so that I could have a sale. I didn't really like to get into that, but anyway, I did have a sale, 15% off, and that kick-started my business again. So other people found me, the algorithms in Etsy were sparking and putting customers my way. And I kept getting messages from Etsy saying I was almost reaching the criteria for a star seller. Now, for those that don't know, to meet the criteria, you have to have sales at a certain amount, depending on which country you live in, but I met that criteria. You had to respond to messages quickly. I met that criteria. Shipping, you have to ship quickly. I met that criteria. Ratings, I had 5-star ratings, so I met that criteria. But the criteria that I couldn't meet was you had to have 10 orders in 3 months. Now, I didn't do that because some of my items were expensive, and of course I'm not going to sell a lot of expensive goods on Etsy, so I didn't meet that criteria, and I didn't really think that I'd ever meet that, so I wasn't expecting to get to the star seller. However, my business continued to grow steadily, and then in December 2022 I became a star seller. I didn't really know what to do. I thought, well, this is it, I've made it, star seller, all the doors will be open for me. And then in January of 2023, I sold 2 quilts to The Crown, to Elstree Studios, where they are filming the TV series The Crown. So I had celebrity quilts now. The world was my oyster, or so I thought. However, the complete opposite happened. Overnight, the traffic to my site seemed to stop. The complete opposite seemed to happen. Fame and fortune is just elusive to me. I don't really want either. But I was expecting a little bit more than I got. My top views in my shop had been 1,325 and visits were 1,026, and they just decreased and decreased until in July of 2023 I had my worst figures ever. Views in my shop were 122, and then visits were 127. So I don't really know what to say about that. I know that times are hard for a lot of people, but I'd have thought people might have just been looking, if not buying, but there's just no activity. And that happened, maybe it's just a coincidence, but that happened immediately after getting star seller. I'm not saying anything about Etsy's algorithms. I don't know anything about it. I'm not qualified to comment, but something happened. So quilts are a luxury item, and when times are hard, those are the things you give up. So I've carried on with my shop. It's still open. And then in August, I had increased views. Now, I think that might be to do with you lovely viewers in YouTube land. I think some of you know that I've got a shop and you're just having a little look around, which is fine. At least people are there, still in my world. because the visits and views were so low, I thought perhaps I'll run a sale. If you recall, last year I ran a sale in September and that was very successful. It might have been the start of the end. I don't know if that caused my demise, being a star seller. However, I thought I would run a sale. So this time I reduced all of the children's quilts by 25%, which when you consider the cost of them was a good saving, but not a sniff, nothing. I mean, people obviously just don't want to buy handmade children's quilts from me. And so I had to think long and hard about that, because I bought the children's fabric in COVID lockdown. And so I had all this fabric. I didn't really know what to do with it. I did put together the quilt. I did sell a few and I had 5-star reviews. My customers were really pleased with them. But, it's just not worth me trying to put the time and effort into having them in a shop. And I think perhaps it might have been making my shop look a little bit confused, having adults' quilts and children's quilts in there. So I've decided that I would take all of the children's quilts out and I found a new home for them. And that is Project Linus. And I didn't know very much about it, but in the UK we have chapters, the same as you do in America and Canada, where they do accept them. So I got in touch with the person who runs our local chapter. Her name is Kim. So I'll show you how that went. Well, there are 10 children's quilts in all that I'm going to send off to the Linus project, and it's raining outside at the moment, so I'll show you them inside one at a time. So Kim said that she would prefer the quilts to be larger than 30 inches square. This is the smallest of the ones I'm giving her, and this one is 31.5 inches square. So as you can see, it's in a coral and teal. They are friendship stars, and then if you get closer, you can see in the centre of each of the stars there's a little woodland animal. So it's really pretty, and I think someone should love this one. So it'd be suitable for a girl or a boy. So that's quilt number 1. And this is quilt number 2. And again, I think it's suitable for a girl or a boy. And it's little houses. And then when you look closely, again, they're little woodland animal fabric prints, scrappy prints that I just put together. There's a little fox peeping out of that door. There's rabbits and birds. Again, just made out of scraps. So that's quilt number 2. And quilt number 3 is all about the cars. Lots of sort of vehicles on this one. Another scrappy quilt. And you can see all sorts of big Tonka trucks, diggers, tractors, vintage cars, everything that a car lover will love, hopefully. So quilt number 4 is pretty in pink. So it's a courthouse steps block. And if I just take you in, you can see that the centre are pretty flamingos as a border in pink. So quilt number 5 is another pink one. So it's squares on point with a scrappy background, and it's all half square triangles. You can just have a look. All sorts of pinks and reds and soft flowers, and another pretty one perhaps for a girl. So quilt number 6 is the mermaid quilt, and I really enjoyed making this one. So there's a little princess sailing the boat, the hot air balloons in the sky, and then below in the underwater kingdom there are mermaids and all sorts of fish. So I've loved making each and every one of these quilts. So that's where my pleasure has come, but it's not good for them to be in a cupboard. They need to be out in the world. And quilt number 7, a little bright one here. Again, I think for a girl or a boy. It's spaceships and aliens and stars. So I'll take you closer through. You'll be able to see there's little aliens and planets, rocket ships popping up everywhere. And quilt number 8 is soft pinks and soft grey hearts. And when you look closer, you can see that there are all sorts of little animals, again, waiting to be spied and found and loved. So pinks, whites, and greys with a touch of gold. And quilt number 9 is all about the dinosaurs. So you can see there's a soft grey, white and black. If I take you closer, you can see we have dinosaurs with their names, Diplodocus. And this one is fantastic. This is a black background with white images, and it's the skeletons of the dinosaur, of all the body parts. And that has a soft orange, teal and grey contrast. And then quilt number 10 is another of the larger ones, and this is like a tumbling blocks or steps, and you've got jungle animals dancing around or smiling out at you. Again, for a girl or a boy, anyone that likes animals. And this is the back, and I think I like this more than the front. So you can see it's all pieced. If I move closer, you can make it out. So there's a sort of a cheetah print that I've included, and then there's piano keys around 2 of the sides, and I've got this fantastic dark green background print, beautiful animals on, and we featured some of the front, and you've got all these lovely animals. So that's it. That's 10 quilts I'm sending off to the Linus project. Well, I've had a really lovely afternoon. I took the quilts over to Kim, who's in charge of the Linus project in Staffordshire. A wonderful woman, giving freely of her time, and she is running all over the place to different charities, different hospitals, and she assures me that all of the 10 quilts will be finding a new home soon, and she was grateful for them. So I'm feeling really good now about Project Linus, about putting my quilts there, because I have given quilts away to different charities, and there's always, unfortunately, a disaster somewhere in the world, and I have sent quilts off, but sometimes you're just not sure they're getting to the people that need them. And so when I spoke to Kim, she filled me with reassurance, and I thought, I really want to do this. So whereas I was trying to get rid of all my children's fabrics and get them out of my stash, now I'm thinking, actually, I really want to make children's quilts, not to sell, not for any child in particular, but just for the Project Linus. So that is something I'm going to continue to do. But that now leaves my shop with just adults' quilts in. So I've looked at the quilts that are remaining in my shop. Everything about them looks okay. You can tell it's not a professional photographer that has taken the photos, but they look clear. The images are clear, the descriptions are clear. My 5-star reviews are all there for people to see. So I think that's okay. I'm not selling elsewhere because the taxes and the cost of postage is so great. I shall continue and see what happens. And if I'm not selling to the global market, there is a question that keeps bugging me, and that is, am I selling on the right platform? Because Etsy is great at opening your goods to a global market. However, if I'm only selling in the UK, we do have a smaller selling platform called Folksy, and I've been looking at that recently because I looked on the Etsy market and I looked at quilts that were for sale today in my price range. So they're in blocks, the price range is in Etsy, and it's between £75 and £250. That's where my quilts fall. And there were 84,409 results for handmade patchwork quilts in that block. So obviously not getting seen, it isn't surprising. So maybe I will move over to Folksy and see how that goes. It's a big decision to make, really, because I have been successful on Etsy, star seller. Don't go down that route. But I'm not trying to run a business. I'm not going to get rich from selling my quilts. All I want to do is to make enough money to clear the costs of making the quilt so that I can buy more fabric and make more quilts. And that's all I want to do. So I might be able to do that in another market. So that is what I do with quilts that I've made and I don't have a home for. I either try and sell them or I give them to Project Linus. So that's where I am at the moment. If you have any experience with folksy and you'd like to share that, please do. Or if you are a handmade quilt maker on Etsy and you are successful and you don't sell any other items, so you don't sell evergreen items, so you don't sell kits or you don't sell patterns, you're just selling the handmade quilts yourself. If you are successful of that, you don't have to give me any details or your shop, but I'd just like to know if it is possible to do that, or is the market too swamped? I don't get many viewers from the UK, so primarily it will be American and Canadian and Australian viewers that might answer that. But I'd still like to know how you're doing in those countries, or are you being pushed out of the market yourselves? Okay, I think I'm going to close now. Hope you found it interesting. I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to make quilts. That's all I want to do. Okay. If you're still there, give yourselves a pat on the back, a nice cup of tea. Thanks very much for your company. Take care of yourselves. Bye.